прекрасного далека, голос утренний в серебряной росе. Слышу голос и манящая дорога кружит голову, как в детстве карусель. Прекрасно недалеко, не будь ко мне жестоко, не будь ко мне жестоко.
You know, I rather fancy going for a swim. Anyway, while we were doing all that, Perun was dropped on India. The Russians, eh? They don't muck about. I saw a demonstration of Perun, you know. Couldn't really talk about it before, since I was being headhunted for a post on the engineering team. Lots of hush-hush, cloak and dagger, being sneaked across borders and so forth. I turned them down, mind you. The food was appalling. In any other situation, Perun would have been a devastating field deployment. Not that the Indian deployment was what you'd call entirely unsuccessful.
Sarvam Kalvidam Brahm. All this is total Brahm, total Krishna.
Astonishing piece of engineering, really. Fitting all that inside a man. Oh, really, there wasn't a man inside there, though. Not anything you'd recognize as human. The chunk of the previous iteration's brain that survived Granada, the part that had learned to interface with mechanical limbs and onboard computers, they managed to clone that part a few times. Perun actually had 4 sub-brains scattered around the container of his body, running his systems or seated as backups. More than any of them, I think, Perun represented the true beginning of the industrialization of human intelligence. Not entirely unsuccessful, as I say. I believe that was the point at which spy satellites could once again get a good look inside India. But I wasn't paying attention at that exact moment in time. I was busy ending the world. The thing was sporulating, communicating by a chemical stream that was molding air currents even as it rode them. Air traffic was shut down due to the freak airstream racing out of Middle England. Our artificial space god was speaking in chemicals. It briefly occurred to me once again that mushrooms only grow on dead things. I wonder if Jerry Craven would have smiled to think of that. A weaponized human. Never more coldly aware of that than when being transported in the belly of a bomber. I wonder at the stories that man must have told himself, just to stay approximately sane. I wonder how he could have justified being taken from heaven to be dropped on the earth like a bomb on Hiroshima, and then being taken back by heaven afterwards. Around this time, the inevitable happened in Somalia. And by inevitable, I mean rastas plus ganja plus nuclear devices. Almost coinciding with a nuclear event in the Venezuelan Amazon, where their uranium deposits were located. Now, there had been rumors of a Venezuelan superhuman development project called Libertador. One presumes that mistakes were made. Other mistakes? Assuming that Malak, walking from Iran to India, would move at a human pace, or that he would do human things along the way. Everyone saw the hole he made in Tehran. The hole he made by presumably disassociating atomic bonds in proximate space. Or as one wag in the office put it, killing things by looking at them. It appeared that he could extend that field of destruction around him, and that it tailed behind him somewhat like the tail of a comet is imagined to do. Krishna was clearly more sensitive to incursions on his territory at this point. And this next event pointed up something interesting that was the source of much discussion at my lab, at least for an hour or two. What makes a god? The ability to destroy, or the ability to create? Malak could obviously render things down into a pile of loose atoms just by walking past them. But Krishna walled up a country just by wishing it. That was quite fascinating. You analyzed the event quite closely, Tommy, I know. I would have loved to have seen the figures. Krishna created or moved material faster than Malak's field of destruction could get rid of it. It was almost funny how a creature as powerful as Malak could be so indistinctively and utterly diffused. Almost. In the aftermath, we wondered if Krishna did not predict Malak, and simply used him as a tool in a second phase of his operations. Perhaps the whole thing was premeditated. Perhaps he understood that in panic, Malak would extend the field of his effect to the vastest scale of his ability in trying to save himself. And that was what Krishna required for his next trick. Malak's field of destruction, ramped up to its extreme level, wasn't going to simply shut off on impact. His momentum would carry him straight through the moon, his field coring the sphere. Poor old moon. With a good half of it torn into dust, and the rest of it suffering severe damage to its atomic bonds. It didn't really have a chance, once an Indian god had decided to throw an Iranian devil at it. And, well, neither did we. Not immediately disastrous, of course, as none of the lunar chunks were big enough to arrive on Earth at extinction impact size. But quite a lot of little chunks turned up. There were also, as you'll recall, several significant floods and storms. The temperature dropped quite hard, and I imagine it'll stay less than balmy until what happens, happens. I suspect it was around this time that I decided to leave my place of employment. Honestly, things have gotten a little bent. I can't be certain of some linear time sequences. Chunks of continent hauling into the sea. chunks of moon falling on the planet, a few nukes going off, it was definitely time to be on the move. I had my mobile kit with me, so I could keep tabs on things quite effectively, given the taps and hacks I had in place, which had mostly been instituted to help me keep my job. I always intended to head for London. London still has the best deep-core blast bunkers, and my security clearance could get me into one. But no, obviously it didn't work out like that. But I definitely needed to run away from where I was. The Maitreya movement happened while I was traveling. In Varanasi. Some considerable distance from Mumbai, in a pocket on the Ganges that Krishna's reconstruction was only just reaching. Funny thing I saw on the telemetry. India's air really was getting cleaner. Krishna actually had recombined the matter of Indian infrastructure, despite all the fires, the atomized Indians, and the nuke next door, into machinery that could radically improve the environment. He really was going to save India. Maitreya was ultimately a very interesting antagonist for Krishna. Krishna clearly preferred to work with objects, land, inert matter. Maitreya clearly preferred to work with human beings. If we'd just let Krishna get on with it, we could be living in some kind of paradise by now. Isn't that a terrible thought? If only cooler heads had prevailed. If Dajjal hadn't been released, if the Chinese had waited, if good old Jerry hadn't been deployed. I sometimes wonder, if I'd stayed on base, could I have affected things for the better? Could one sane man have really saved the world? I wish you could see the water, Tommy. It looks lovely.
Прекрасно недалеко, прекрасно недалеко, я начинаю